honor in honor of the Bitcoin price crashing, um, which is both painful, uncomfortable, exciting, a massive opportunity. Um, like this is genuinely good for Bitcoin. But how many of you guys, before we get into the panel, how many of you guys are familiar with the the story of the Texas hedge, or have ever heard the term being Texas hedged? Okay, only one of you guys. Okay, Ova's heard of it. So, um, I'm going to read this because I learned this long ago, and I've always thought about the work that I do in the Bitcoin space. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Parker Lewis. I help on the side with administering Bitcoin Park Austin and the Commons, but I also work on Bitcoin payments at Zaprite. And this is the earliest known reference to the Texas hedge. The earliest known reference comes from James Gilbert, a former Trans Market Group floor clerk. This is Chicago Trading, who relayed the following to Trader Magazine in 2006. Quote, I was a runner at the time, and I see this guy's signal to buy 500 futures, big futures, and I know he just bought calls. So I yell, hey, you are backwards on your hedge. And he looks at me square in the face with these eyes of cobalt, not an ounce of joviality in his veins. And he says, boy, I'm from Texas. We don't hedge when we're right in Texas. We double down, son. The whole pit must have heard him because from that moment on, anytime any trader mistakenly hedged backwards, they would say, I Texased. And the whole trading crowd would point and laugh. Everybody but Bill from Texas. He would just stare with those piercing cobalt eyes. So the way that relates to Bitcoin, it's like when Bitcoin's down and you're right about Bitcoin, you double down, you don't hedge. The fiat system is broken. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. We've got three people, all based here in Austin. Jimmy Song, who's an author, wrote Programming Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoin developer. He teaches Bitcoin programming. He's also written many books in addition to Programming Bitcoin. Thank God for Bitcoin, Bitcoin and the American Dream, the Little Bitcoin book, and most recently, Fiat Ruins Everything. And then we've got Harry Gray, who is co-host of the Meat Mafia podcast, but he's also co-founder of Noble Origins, plant-based, animal-based protein. What am I talking? That is that Fiat Freudian slip. Okay. And then we have Andy Schoonover. Yeah, Andy Schoonover, who's the founder and CEO of Crowd Health. I'm personally a member of Crowd Health. Andy supports the Bitcoin Commons here. They regularly sponsor these meetups. We're incredibly grateful for them. If you hate your healthcare, it's too expensive and you're not getting what you need. I've been a Crowd Health member myself for 3 years now. They've been there when I need it. It works. I've got not only am I on it, but my wife and my 15-month-old are on it. And the theme that we're going to talk about tonight is the intersection of fiat food, fiat health, and Bitcoin. Jimmy's going to lead the discussion. He's going to provide his own insights. But with that, we'll bring up Jimmy, Andy, and Harry. And then after this, we're going to go for about 30 minutes, and then we'll do Q&A for 15 to 20. So you'll have a chance to answer your questions. And part of what prompted this, of why I got these guys together tonight, which obviously Bitcoin's crashing, but the impetus of it was the food pyramid literally being turned upside down in the last month, and then President Trump also giving a Oval Office address, finally talking about how healthcare has become unaffordable and needing better transparency. And Andy had put out a comment about how, how about we actually fix the system, not just be more transparent about how broken the system is. So all of it ties back to the money, and I'll let Jimmy help lead us through that discussion.
All right. All right, thanks everybody for coming out. I want to start the discussion with something that I've observed over the last 10 years. Right, it used to be that we were told you need to avoid cholesterol, that red meat was bad for you, right? That eating too many eggs would be bad, that your heart health mattered, and that you should eat Cheerios for breakfast. Um, all of that has largely shifted, and the Overton window shift on both health and food has been significant over the last 10 years. So, what's your observation on why that is, how that happened? Because I think as Bitcoiners, there's something that we're we've been observing a little bit in Bitcoin, but not to the degree that it has in health and food.
Yeah, so I actually started my career out in finance. So I'm relatively new to the health space, been in the health space for the last 4 years, but it's long been a passion of mine. So I would say the biggest observation that I have is the decentralization of media has helped people get access to information that has helped them make more informed personal decisions around health as it comes to coming up against the massive healthcare and food system that is in place, the legacy food system, which um, I think for several decades, probably starting in the 60s and 70s, there was a massive shift in policy away from kind of your conventional grandma's common sense diet, which is eat real food. It doesn't take a rocket science to come up with the foods that we should be eating. It should be grown from the ground. You should know, um, potentially know the person who grew it. And really, the globalization of food after World War II just brought all these new policies into play, and we started wanting to prioritize shipping product overseas and I think it's interesting that at that point, too, we start breaking from the gold standard and we see all of these centralizing forces across so many different industries happening at once. But food is I think the last you know, you call it 50 years, there's just been this massive shift. And I think the reason that started was we started to think um, of food entirely differently than we ever had in the course of human history. We started to think of it as this, highly processed foods are starting to be created through these big corporations that are starting to get more and more government subsidy dollars to help them fund their growth. And yeah, really, I think the centralizing forces from the 60s to the early 2000s really had a stronghold on the food industry and the healthcare industry. And I would say the decentralization of media kind of pierced the veil of a lot of things. People like Nina Teicholz and Mark Sisson and so many incredible like literally just internet bloggers at the time and authors. They're amazing people who are putting great information out there, but they kind of started breaking things down in a more common sense way. Like we need to get back to eating these quote unquote primal foods that we've been our grandparents, used to make. And I think once that kind of opened up the floodgates over the last 10 years, that's only accelerated in terms of the information that's gotten out there and just the ability for people to experiment for themselves and realize that red meat isn't all that bad for you. And you actually might start feeling way better because you're not eating all these processed foods. So, yeah, I would credit the decentralization media.
How about health? How do you think that? I think most people at this point understand that your healthcare or health insurance costs way too much for the benefit you get, unless you happen to be in the last 2 years of your life or something. Um, and that, I mean, it's gotten to the point where people are celebrating the fact that the CEO of United is killed by some random dude. Like that tells you that things have shifted completely from say 2008 with the passage of Obamacare and people thinking, oh, this is it's a new era in health and we're all going to now be healthy because we have universal health care of some kind. Things have shifted radically since then. What do you think has happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things with nutrition, kind of going what the Harry was talking about, is it's very difficult to have really good scientific data on nutrition because it takes a long time. Oftentimes the things that we're doing now won't impact us for decades. And there are so many variables in what we eat and our sleep and our exercise and all of these things that it's nearly impossible to say this one variable is the primary determinant of an outcome. And the reason I say that is because if the science is so opaque, what I think we've seen per your original question or statement is that when the science is opaque, people will take advantage of that to expand their own causes, right? And so we're seeing Cheerios being, good for your health, and who wants that? The big, product guys over at Cheerios, whoever owns that. And we see, statins with heart. Well, statins is the most profitable pharmaceutical ever created. And so, what is the incentive behind making sure that cholesterol is the primary determinant of heart disease? Well, it's money, right? And so I think with this opaque nutrition science that we have out there, not very clear, people are taking advantage of that and using it for, profit. So I think that's kind of one of the things I wanted to expand upon what Harry said. But, something happened in the early 1970s. A lot happened, came off of the gold standard. And started eating all kinds of processed foods and crap. If you want to read more about that, read the book called Fiat Food by Matthew Lyshak, which is an awesome read if you want to understand kind of the what happened with the food system. But ultimately, that then led to the destruction of our healthcare system. I'll just give you a couple things. One is in the early 1970s, 1% of the population had diabetes. 1%. Today, anybody have any ideas? It's 10% that are diabetic, but 40% are pre-diabetic. So we went from 1% to 10%, about to go to 40%, and now 25 cents of every dollar that we spend on healthcare is on somebody with diabetes. So if you want to think about the kind of determinants of prices going up, it's because of these chronic conditions as a result of the crap that we're eating, and that's ultimately leading to your premiums increasing. And so, that's the challenge that we have right now. And then add on top of that a government that wants to put all these regulatory things in place to protect you. What is it? What does that mean? It's like, I'm the government. I'm here to protect you or save you or whatever that is.
The eight most frightening words in the
Yeah.
world. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. I think that's
There
Reagan's
you go.
quote.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just one more on that specifically. People think about healthcare and they're like, man, it's so complex. This healthcare system is really complex. And sorry if you've heard me on a podcast, but it's not that complex. You have the sellers of healthcare. We're all Bitcoiners in here, so we kind of understand the basic of economics, but we have the sellers of healthcare, which are these big hospital systems. They clearly want the price to go up. They're selling the good. They want the price to go up. Makes sense. All about it. The problem is that we have the buyers of healthcare, which are these big health insurance plans. Little do people know, they also want the price to go up. So if you think what happened with Obamacare is that they limited the amount of profit that a health insurance plan can make. So if you have $1,000 of premium, the insurance company can only make $150. So if these are for-profit organizations that want to increase their profit, what has to happen? Your premium has to go, if your profit needs to go up by 10% or you want it to go up by 10%, your premium has to go up by 10%. So your premium has to go from $1,000 to $1,100 for them to make more money. So the buyers of the healthcare and the sellers of healthcare both want the price to go up. And so it doesn't take, a PhD in economics to figure out if the buyer and the seller want the price to go up, the price is going up. And so, healthcare is not that complex when you know that the buyers and the sellers want prices to go up over time.
Yeah, and I want to point out something that you said. There's a lot of people taking advantage of the system, right? Both in food and in healthcare. And in my book, I call them rent seekers, right? People that get in the middle of a transaction, don't add any value, but extract money from it some way or somehow. What are some subtle, unknown rent-seeking things in your particular industry that you can tell us about? Something interesting about, say, the way the insurance system works, who's making the money, right? Who's actually profiting. I think you came up with a good one with the insurance companies, which is essentially all rent seeking. But in food, I feel like there are regulations, and there are you know people that sell to comply and things like that, that not that many people know about, particularly with the food production, that maybe you can enlighten us a little bit on.
Yeah, we've had some amazing farmers on our podcast. Joel Salatin in Virginia, one of them, and Will Harris, who's one of the legacy owners of White Oak Pastures in Georgia. And, I remember having the conversation with Joel Salatin just talking about the labels that, he has to pay for and just the nature of a lot of the food that he raises on his land. Like some of it he can't even sell to his neighbor, just up the road because there's such strict laws around the processing and the labeling. And his whole point is like, they make me seem like I'm a drug dealer just trying to sell eggs to my neighbor without putting certain labels on, the eggs or the meat that they're processing. So I think the biggest one in food is certainly the labels and kind of these pay to play things that you see on most packages these days. It's really more or less,
So pasture raised, organic,
yeah, pasture raised, organic, grass fed. I mean, the grass fed certification process is even like the experts in the industry. There's so much kind of qualifying things in order to figure out like what's really grass fed. Does the cattle live on grass its entire life, or can they spend 30 days in a feedlot, or can they have some supplemental hay? So what really is grass fed? So that label I think is an interesting one. I think another one in the food space and health space is higher education. I feel like higher education um, is a huge rent seeker in the world of like the soft science of nutrition. Like there's so much money that's being spent to kind of persuade the public perception of what you should and shouldn't be eating when it's I think like more or less a common sense type of like you can come up with what you shouldn't be eating based on common sense or even just historical facts around, what did your ancestors or lineage eat 150 years ago, or what did they have access to? The whole idea of globalization of food is a relatively new phenomenon. So I think like higher ed is a massive rent seeker in the world of
Or
health and
even
wellness.
like bureaucrats and the people that told us the original food pyramid, which got upended, right? Reversed. But that the corporations in that case would be the rent seekers that are trying to upend it so they can sell their product as healthy when it's really not. Yeah.
Yeah, the number of studies that if you look at just the number of studies around nutrition that have come out over the last 50 years, it's like a hockey stick.
Mm.
Right when it hits around like the year 2000. And I just think it's very funny that we're studying this problem that's not getting any better. So what are we
Why are
studying?
they
What are
studying
we
it?
studying? Or why are we putting these studies out when it doesn't seem like anything's actually getting applied on the other end that's creating the outcome that we want from the things that we're studying?
Well, doctors they don't study nutrition in medical school. There's a study a test you have to take. I think it was the Society of Internal Medicine. You have to take this test I think it's 10 years. There was 0 questions on last year's test on lifestyle. Like this is, doctors talking about our internal medicine, and there was 0 lifestyle questions. So that just shows you that our people are not being educated in a way to actually understand nutrition. And I kind of am thankful for that a little bit because, if you have these medical schools who are being funded by pharmaceutical companies being the ones that teach our doctors about nutrition, clearly there's going to be a bias there. And so I'm somewhat thankful for that. I would say, I'm very biased. I started a company to try to keep people from getting, totally gouged by health insurance. Any Crowd Health members, by the way? And all right, we have a few Crowd Health members. Yeah. So in essence, what we're trying to do is take away the middleman, which is health insurance, which I think is the greatest rent seeker in the healthcare space. And just quick story. I was talking to a guy probably, I don't know, 6 months ago, and his first job out of college was with a health insurance plan, and he was building them a model so that they would approve or deny claims based upon market conditions. So literally, have a dial that says if the market conditions are good and this big pot of fiat that I have in my bank account or, in my investment accounts are good, doing well, I want to keep that there as long as possible. And so I'm going to deny claims. If the market is not very good, I will approve claims. And he has this, and he says to this day, there's a version of this model still being used with the health insurance plans. And so, if that's not a rent seeker, I'm not sure what is.
That is hilarious because I used to work for Athena Health, and one of the things that we tried to figure out, it was a medical billing company, right? And one of the things that you would try to figure out is what gets a claim denied. So we came up with all of these metrics. I don't think current stock performance was ever a variable in there. We had all kinds of stuff like if you're missing a field, then that'll get it denied. So you kick it back. So, they fill it out before you submit the claim and so on. But market performance, that's the first time I've ever heard
It's
of
crazy.
that.
And this is firsthand from this guy who's now, he's a decade removed and he's trying to repent for his sin. But, also, I think, there's a study that came out again about a year ago, maybe it was 18 months ago, that doctors spend 16 hours a week fighting with health insurance plans to get paid. So can you imagine, like, in your day-to-day job, spending 2 of the 5 days of your work week fighting to get paid? And so, one of the things that we enable is you go and you pay them directly. You show up with, a credit card, hopefully eventually with ZapRight or, a Bitcoin payment system, and you pay them immediately. They say, you provided me a service, I'm going to pay you immediately. But right now, what happens with these doctors is they have, 2 or 3 billers in the back, and they've got to pay Athena, what, 4 or 5%, 6%, whatever, to get it paid. And then they got to spend 2 days of their week fighting. And so if you pay them directly, they can now go back to doing what they really got into medicine to do, which is take care of you. They get 2 days of their week back so they can create more revenue. And so these billing processes, what they call revenue cycle management within the hospital systems, are huge leeches on the system, and upwards of 30%, maybe even 40% of what we're spending in healthcare is towards administrative, bureaucratic garbage. And so we are probably 5 to 6 times, depending upon what country you look at, more expensive to process these bills than any other country on the planet. And because so many people are in the middle of that transaction, rent seekers that take pieces and little cuts, that it's very, very difficult to get actually paid when you're a doctor.
Yeah, and it acts kind of like a forced loan, right? Like, because you should get paid, but in the middle is this insurance company that holds the money, right? They've gotten the money from the consumer, and they hold the money and take advantage of that money, including putting it into investments and so on. And they are incentivized to delay sending it to you.
And I think there's analogies to the financial system in the fiat system, right? Where I don't know any of you all, but oftentimes if I transfer money or I ACH it or whatever, and within Crowd Health we actually have people ACHing, they let that money sit in their account, the processor or the bank, for 2, 3, 4 days oftentimes. And what is what they say is, oh, we have to let it clear, we got to make sure it's right, yada bullshit. It's not that. It's you want to have it sit in your bank account so you're getting interest on it, as opposed to, letting the money actually flow to where it's supposed to go. And by the way, they charge you for it too. They're like, if you want to wire it, they charge you $60 or whatever it is to wire. It's like, man, let's get on, a Bitcoin system where it happens instantaneously. The transaction fees are pennies, over Lightning, right? That's where we need to go. So, ultimately what we're trying to do is, like, I'm a Bitcoiner at heart. And I actually, Jimmy gave me this idea back in 2021 when we were having steak over at, what is that restaurant? Capital Grill. Is, man, if we could get Bitcoiners on one side of the healthcare transaction, and then doctors and hospital systems on the other side of that transaction, and transact in Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin needs to be a form of a medium of exchange. Personal opinion, don't kill me, sailor. But if you can do that, then you have this, Bitcoin circularity within healthcare. That if you can do that, I think that goes a long way of having Bitcoin circularity throughout the economy. I mean, healthcare is a $5.6 trillion industry. So it is a massive industry. If you can get Bitcoin used, and I'm actually having a conversation with one of the top 10 largest hospital systems in the country who is considering taking Bitcoin as a payment. So we need more Bitcoiners to join us to have the kind of the demand side of that equation. So
Andy, sorry if I missed it. This is the podcaster me needing to ask a question, but you said that when you settle, is there a discount when you settle immediately in cash? It was like, I think on our podcast you said it was like 40% or something like that.
yeah, so one of the biggest lies in healthcare is that these huge companies like United Healthcare can use that power to get really good prices. And in fact, the prices are garbage. If you go and pay in cash direct, you can get a 50% discount by paying them direct. And so over 35,000 bills now that we've funded, we're seeing almost exactly a 50% discount to what the health plans pay by just paying directly in cash.
In a sense, an insurance claim is a fiat currency, right?
Yes.
And people are willing to trade it at 50 cents to par because it's that painful. It takes that long to go get paid. But this brings up something that I want to talk about with respect to the fiat system, which is that there is a component of loans and sort of fiat games that get played in all of these things, right? For example, with a lot of farming, I know that a lot of farmers are in tremendous amounts of debt. They operate sort of with that huge debt, and they have to continually pay interest on that debt as a part of their livelihood, and it's essentially trapped them. And in healthcare, of course, there's a lot of debt all over the place. But that loan system, the system of fiat monetary expansion, which happens through loans, is an integral part of both these industries. And in a sense, that's what's ended up corrupting it to a degree. So what are some ways in which the monetary system like subtly sort of changes food and healthcare in ways that are very detrimental to the consumer?
I think in food, I think the parallels between the medical system and the food system will be very surprisingly or like very similar. When it comes to agriculture, when a lot of these farmers are going to school, they're taking on a ton of debt and they're learning the conventional system of agriculture, which is a system predicated on borrowing a lot of money to get the land you need, the equipment you need, the
The seeds.
pesticides you need, the seeds you need, um, all these things that you're learning how to be a part of this system, but it's all predicated on taking out massive amounts of money that you're not going to be able to pay back for a very long period of time. And the system is really good at creating. I mean, it's industrialized.
Well, it's enormous scale, right? They're
Scale?
forced to scale up way bigger than they would normally as a one-person shop or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no aspect of the industrial food model that's closed loop where there's a farmer out there who has 10 different animals and he's able to like this is the parallel regenerative system that exists, but it's much smaller and it's now starting to get some funding from the government. But there's the industrial model and then the regenerative model. The regenerative model is closed loop. There are systems that sustain themselves. You have multiple animals, multiple species working together to create harmony between the soil, the grass. The animals that live on that soil are able to eat the grass, and some of the other animals are protecting against insects and all the other things that might, worms that might be a problem or pests that might be a problem. And so there's a beautiful model out there that exists, but that's not the one that the education system supports or is investing into. The education system as it stands right now for agriculture is entirely supporting the industrial model, which is entirely predicated on pesticides, herbicides,
And a lot of debt,
fertilizers.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where it starts. And then, they're taken out after they get out of school, they take out a loan to get the till and the land and all that, and then I think it truly is a form of you know s- slavery, debt
To the
slavery
banks. Yeah.
to the banks. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And there's an information gap that keeps them in that system where it's so risky for them to even consider moving to a regenerative model and cost prohibitive that they would never. I mean, they would potentially like sink their family financially if they made that risk. So they're kind of just stuck in this subsidy system. There's lots of people out there who are corn farmers in the middle of this country who are literally just throwing away corn just because they're getting paid from the subsidies that exist. They're not even they're just getting paid to grow it and not use it. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think debt on in healthcare is on the supply and the demand side. When I was thinking about starting Crowd Health, one of the things that I realized was something like 250,000 families every year go bankrupt due to a medical event, even though they have health insurance. So they have health insurance and they're still going bankrupt. And so why is
What's the
that?
point?
Yeah, I was like, what is the point, right? It's for two reasons. One, another stat that I found out was about 20% of claims are denied. And I actually started Crowd Health because my daughter had a hole in her eardrum that we went and got fixed, and the insurance plan I had at the time denied that bill, saying it was medically unnecessary. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. Like, my daughter's got a hole in her eardrum. She's screaming bloody mercy, all night. And they denied it. And that was $8,000. And so I was fortunate to have $8,000. A lot of people don't have $8,000 that they can go and pay for some of these things. And then the other one is these deductibles, which is, oftentimes with the Affordable Care Act plan, you've got 10, 12, $14,000 deductibles, which means you have to pay the first 10 to $14,000 of any health event before the insurance plan will come up with anything. Just uh, for giggles, I went on the Affordable Care Act for my family, and it was $1,400 a month for me, my wife, and my two girls, and a $16,000 deductible. So, like, I'm paying $30,000 before the insurance plan pays a dime. And I think so. That's on kind of the consumers, and on the other end, it's private equity using debt and leverage are buying up all these practices and facilities, and they are combining them all, into one as in a roll up strategy. And this is all financed by debt. And as a result of that, there's basically, two anesthesiology groups in town, which means that they use that leverage to then get paid more by the insurance plans.
Monopolistic
So
pricing.
it's monopolistic, oligopolistic pricing. And so that's why we're seeing a drive up in prices, is because even if the insurance plans wanted to negotiate, they really can't, because if you come to Austin, you got to have that anesthesiology group, you got to have Ascension, you got to have St. David's. If you don't have one of those are all oligopolies, then you can't operate in Austin. And so they have no real market forces to press down those prices, and that's why we just see prices going up. It's like you get into negotiations time with these health plans and these hospitals, and I've talked to enough hospital CFOs to know this is the case. They get to the negotiation table, and it's like, okay, what is the biggest rate that we can get away with without the regulators like getting in our business and thinking that there's some collusion? It's kind of like a wink, wink. Like, let's do 5 or 6%, and that's good. It's like not crazy, but it's not, everybody's making more money. So it's a pretty crazy thing that goes on between these kind of oligopolies within healthcare. All, I think, driven by this fiat debt component that enables them to do this.
Yeah, and what it sounds like with both of you, in both of your industries, is that the fiat money, the loans, are used to scale up to enormous amounts, and then you get essentially monopoly pricing, which ends up hurting the consumer significantly because they don't have as many choices, and all the small players are just kind of priced out or bought out or go bankrupt or something like that. And you end up with kind of the systems we have now, where you have 4 or 5 huge food companies, 4 or 5 huge health insurance companies, maybe a couple of hospitals per big city. It's really gotten to a point where consumers don't really have a choice anymore. In a sense, Fiat money has made choice go away. What's so my question to you guys then is, how does direct payment, right? Like how does Bitcoin, how does sound money change that dynamic, and how can we break it? Like, because in a sense, all these things look just so big, so intimidating, and they have so much monetary power because of their access to the money printer. How do we break that lock? And is it possible even for Bitcoiners to make a difference?
This is going to sound super self-serving, and it is probably. But I mean, I think we need to vote with our wallets. You know, if you see things happen, then why are we continuing to purchase the crap food out of the grocery store, the crap health insurance plans? You know, why are we doing it when we know that they're just leeches on society? And so, you know, my two recommendations, and I think one will hit health and one will hit food, but it's try something alternative to health insurance. I think it's we're viable and it works, and you know, go read up and talk to Parker and get his promo code so he can get paid in Bitcoin as a little referral.
I don't
and
have a promo code.
you don't have one?
Do I need it? No, I'm kidding. I don't have one.
We'll get you one.
I won't even take it. I rep it because it's good for me.
Yeah, well, I will. And then the other thing too is like, and it sounds cliche, but it's so real. Like, support your local farmers and ranchers. You know, there's something, and I didn't know this, and you probably did, but like, um, I'm very anti seed oil. I know there's a lot of, you know, debate around this. But the eggs that we're getting from our grocery store are absolute crap, right? I mean, they're eating soy,
Mhm.
and so that's coming in polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFA, that we're now eating. And it's basically like eating canola oil. I mean, it's similar to eating canola oil. So get your eggs from a local farmer, and it's not that hard. I'm no longer affiliated, but I used to own a company called Farmhouse Delivery. They're here in Austin. And what they do is they go to all the local farmers and they'll take their stuff, they'll bring it back centralized and then deliver it directly to your door. And so I have zero affiliation with them. So I'm not making any money off of this. But if you want like local produce, local meat, local eggs, local milk, go to this place because they'll deliver it right to your door, and you will pay more. There's no doubt you're going to pay more for it, but it's better for you. If anything, invest in really good food, or join Crowd Health. You're going to save $1,000 a month, and you can use that to go buy great food. And so those are the two recommendations I have: is just, you know, really vote with your wallets.
Yeah, I think it was Joel Salatin when he was on my podcast. He told me that Americans used to spend double the amount that they do now on food, but half the amount on healthcare. So it's very related, right? We've gone from spending a lot of money on quality food, and then at least inflation adjusted, and not spending so much on our healthcare. But now we've reversed it because we've had crappier food. So if you want a better life, I think the spending more money on food is probably going to be better.
My family is saving $1,000 a month on healthcare. So using Crowd Health versus health insurance, and what do? We use that money to go and buy good food. In 20 or 30 years, are we better off or are we worse off? Like, we're better off because we're eating really good food from our local, you know, ranchers and farmers around there. We're supporting them. I think those are the types of decisions I personally believe that we need to make sure that this ecosystem grows and we get these big food, big ag folks out of our, you know, or from on top of our dinner tables, right? Um,
Yeah, Joel Salatin's that data point's so interesting because what do you? We had him on the pod, and his point was that 30% of any household's budget is going towards healthcare costs and food costs, and that's stayed consistent over the last 120 years. And the caveat is that, you know, it used to be 10% of that was going towards healthcare and 20% was going towards food costs, and that's obviously switched. So it really, I mean, the point being, like, you're paying for your health at some point along the chain. It's just a matter of, you know, when are you going to pay for it? Is it, you know, paying to get into the hospital or get administered medication, or paying for more expensive food? And it's obviously an incredibly sensitive topic because there's a lot of nuance and a lot of lifestyle choices that go into that. But I really do think that there's a lot of decisions that we can make at the individual level, buying local and creating those relationships too. I think like during COVID, there was a lot of people who started to wake up to the idea of, finding a local food source just in case. And it really is like a powerful tool to get higher quality food. You can ask them all the questions that you want and they'll be able to give you all the rundown of, you know, does this chicken eat corn and soy its entire life? And are these eggs just going to be, high in PUFAs when I eat them? Or is it eating what it should be eating, insects and all sorts of other things? So yeah, I think going directly to the source is a really powerful lifestyle choice.
Yeah, and it's also low time preference to invest more in food than your healthcare.